welcome to another segment of the Leadership Coalition here live in the great studios of Intellectual Radio. My name is Gregory Sane, one of the co-founders of the New Black Leadership and the host of the New Black Leadership segment here every Monday at 7 o'clock. I am so thankful, so blessed by the best, yet to have another opportunity, golden opportunity, to speak a few words. Sitting in the studio with Brother Lance Williams, so to have a conversation with the professor. But it's always a blessing, man, to really have clarity, man. I mean, I thank God for the spirit. I thank him for the energy and the frequency that I believe we are divinely on. So thank you all for tuning. Make sure you share this. I know many of you all, check us out every Monday, but I want you to share this. Make sure you share it, Facebook, YouTube, you on Instagram. However you tuning in, please share this with your friends, your family, and your enemies. Definitely want your enemies, because they probably my enemies too, to tune in. Got a really interesting commentary, but I am so happy, Brother Lance, to have you on, man. It's always an honor to have a brother with your knowledge. But I'm going to talk about that word knowledge too, because I mentioned it at the graduation I was speaking at today, the word knowledge. But it's good, man, to have a man such as yourself, brother, who I've known for many, 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 many years. We have soldiered together out here, man, under the command of liberation.
Yes, sir.
And so love you, brother, as this beacon for us in the area of education. And you're an unbelievable author. One of your books, I want to talk a bit about that, because we're still dealing with some of the same issues as it relates to the two organizations, street organizations that exist in Chicago, but have various fractions and cliques and spinoffs. But I want to just talk about the foundation and the whole premise behind those organizations, and looking at what we're dealing with here today. And I know you're still over at Northeastern
Correct.
University, and you are a professor, but you are the assistant director.
Well, I used to be. I stepped down from that position.
Okay, you should be the director. So I want to just put that on record. You should be the director. I'm going to talk about that too. I'm not going to dwell on that, because that's your loss. That's whoever's loss, not your loss, but it's that university loss. And whoever sits on the board, those who have influence, you should be ashamed of yourself that you don't support a soldier and a brother and a scholar such as Brother Lance Williams. And everybody in the community know about his work, and they support him. So anyway, I'm gonna go down that road just a little bit. We ain't gonna dwell on it, because I know whatever you do, by the grace of God, because of your good heart, you're gonna be successful. But one of the major stripes that you have, I'm gonna use the word stripes or bars, man, is that you're a family man. That's one of the most amazing things about you. I admire you for all the other stuff that you do, but not like I admire you for being the father
Thank you.
that you are. That's amazing.
Thank you.
You were inside of, and Earl, Minister Mike, you all have to hear this. I was inside of K&G, the store on Stony, and I was looking for a shirt or something. I was speaking someplace. I forgot. I might have been getting something I forgot what it was, but I ran into the professor there. This man was getting, I think, 3 or 4 different. Now, he don't shop like that. That's you won't find him back in KMG. He don't go. But he had so many occasions. He had this graduation, that graduation on this side of town, somebody graduating over here.
This side of the that side of the country, and on the other side of the country. Yeah.
All in one.
In a 3-day period.
In a 3-day period. How many of your children was graduating?
The 3 oldest graduated on this year, Mother's Day, which was
the 13th.
The 13th. So one graduated out in Cali on the 13th. The other one graduated from here in Chicago from SAIC on the 14th. And the third one graduated from Columbia University in New York on the 15th.
Wow. That's where I was like, man, that was amazing.
Yeah,
that was on a Friday.
That was a Friday.
That was on a Friday. I would never forget it because I was sitting there with my mouth open. I'm like, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And you made them all.
We made them all. We made them all.
Wow, brother.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I want to talk, and that's what I admire, man, that you fit for that role because you're a nurturer, you're a cultivator, and you with a cultivator and a nurturer, your wife, and then your children are leaders. Man, I met your son over at King.
Yes.
During one of the
sit-in protests. That's right.
That little brother wasn't taking no prisoners.
He was the one that, that was 4 years ago.
That was 4 years ago?
Yeah, it was 4 years ago.
Wow.
4.5 years ago.
Oh, boy.
So he was a senior at King, and he just graduated from Pomona College out in right outside of LA.
Right. So real quick, I was driving and this commentary just came to me. This is what the New Black Leadership is about. It's really about being in sync with time. Right. I believe we are, thanks to brother and good friend, Minister Michael Muhammad and Sister Kim Dulaney and her husband, Professor Kelly, and others, yourself too, that you all were, you helped give life back to the New Black Leadership. And we still pumping in life.
That's right.
It's hard sometimes when things seems to kind of sway over here, but when God with you, you ain't dead. You're going to come to life. It's all about timing. So I know they had the BET Awards. I didn't watch it, but I heard some of the commentary, or more so some of the stuff that went on. And I want you all to know Jamie Foxx and some of the folks there. I want to tell Jamie, I love you, man. You funny, you can sing, you can act, and I have to commend you. I heard, you saying some things positive as it relates to the stuff that's happening to Black people out here. But Jamie, you and all of those folks, man, that sit in that audience, you all don't own no farmland. You all haven't pooled your resources to buy your liberation, to sponsor your freedom, to sponsor your own justice and equality. So you can't keep crying that same song and dance when you all have millions of dollars and don't own no farmland, don't own no business. So you can't get too mad at white people. Be mad at yourself. We got to be mad at ourselves because we refuse to unite and we refuse to take our destiny into our own hands. And so that was one of the pieces of the commentary. And so today, when I was speaking, oftentimes we repeat things and sometimes you stop for a minute. And I was telling the people, knowledge is power. And the young lady who sung a great song, it was, man, she could sing. And one of them, this song, I cannot think of the artist. But she inside this song, there's a hero inside. I forgot who made that. There's a hero inside of them or us, and Mariah Carey. So I told her when I got up there to speak, I said, no, there's a God inside you. See, there's a hero, but there's a God power
Mm.
inside of you. And
Right.
once you realize that, you won't be tricked into just getting a so-called education. You will be getting knowledge of yourself, and then you'll know how to access this whole thing called success, because you'll be looking for joy, peace, and serenity. So no matter what your career is, if you playing music, if you're a poet, if you're a teacher, professor, if you're a fireman, if you are an electrician, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're an Indian chief, if you got peace and serenity every day and you looking for real, true joy, you the richest person on the planet, because a bunch of those people with degrees after degrees after degrees, they lonely, they overweight, and they stressed out, and they ain't happy with
Mm.
that.
Mm.
So that's what I said. And then I told her, knowledge ain't just the only thing, it's the truth.
Mm.
The truth is the real power. And so, and so, Brother Lance, there's a lot of stuff going on when it comes to Black people right now, man. And from your perspective, being an author, when you wrote that book, and what was the title of that, the first
So
book?
the first book, most people don't know much about. It's called Culture and Perceptions of Violence-Related Behaviors Among African American Youth. That was the first one, but it's more of an academic book. A lot of the brothers and sisters in the community have not had opportunity to read that because it's more of an academic textbook.
But why the title? The title?
Well, because culture, based on the research that I was able to do. And first, before I, begin to respond to that, I want to thank you. I want to thank Minister Michael Muhammad and the brothers and sisters with the New Black Leadership Coalition, who I'm a proud member of, for inviting me here, having me here. You mentioned my family and my wife and children, which you're absolutely correct is so important to me. So I want to thank my wife too. She was the person that actually laid the foundation for the success that our children have had academically.
Oh, beautiful.
She started home. She homeschooled them through all of them through high school, and so and basically just homeschooled them to the point when they were able to decide on their own what they wanted to do, in terms of school. So she homeschooled them, and they got to the point where they decided, okay, enough of this. I want to go out and see what's, and at that point, they were ready. And so they went out. Each one of them decided where they were going to go to high school, and it's been a blessing to see them grow and develop and come into their own. So you did get a chance to meet that. They followed in our spirit, of watching us do our work and have become naturally activists. So as you know, when the last time you came in contact with Rasia, he was leading the student protest over at King High School, along with my daughter, who was a year behind him, and Zari. And they were real close friends with the young sister, Hadia Pilton. And so upon her tragic death, they started that Project Orange Tree. If you recall that
with the brother, the rapper,
with Lupe Fiasco,
right?
Correct. And so if you look at that movement now, you'll see the big Wear Orange Day campaign that's all over the United States of America. That was the outgrowth of that.
Born right there.
Yeah, right there, right at King High School.
Nice.
With Rasia and Azari and a lot of their friends that were friends of Hadia.
That's your baby? That's your son?
Yeah, and daughter who were a part of it.
Wow.
Which is us.
Right.
They basically just followed in our footsteps.
Well, you noticed that day when they did the sit-in.
Right.
You noticed what I said to those who were from CPS, from the community, the faculty there. I was like, get out the way.
Right.
Get out the way.
Yeah.
This day time.
That's right.
And they did a great job.
Yeah, and they're still doing that work, as a matter of fact. If you see, that whole orange piece has really grown to become an international phenomenon. And it started right in our community based on an unfortunate tragedy. But it looks like that the movement continues.
Yeah, when you talk about movement, I know that when you wrote the other book on
The
the
Stones,
the
right? So
Stones.
I co-authored that book with Natalie Moore.
Okay.
It's called the Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation: Rise and Fall and Resurgence of an American Street Organization. So that book probably is the most popular book in the community as it relates to what I do academically. And the purpose of that book, as you know, was to kind of highlight the history, the growth and development of that organization, but from a social political perspective, not to just focus on just the criminal aspect of the organization, but to look at its role in the history, overall history of Black Chicago and the United States of America, but also to focus on its political um, um, uh, efforts and how it impacted the culture of the city of Chicago and particularly in the Black community.
Yeah, listen, I think just the word when you growth and development,
Hmm.
and you look at these brothers, both Chief Malik
Hmm.
and Chief Hoover,
Hmm.
they political prisoners.
Yeah, and prior to both of those brothers, actually a contemporary of Chief Malik and Chief Bull, who was the leader of the Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation, or at the time Blackstone Rangers. A lot of people leave out Bull when they talk about the Stones because Bull, um, unfortunately, was locked up at the time that the organization became, I would say, a national phenomenon. He was arrested at the end of '68, but Bull was actually the what you would call the big chief. Jeff was the
Okay.
little chief. And when Bull got locked up, Jeff kind of stepped into his shoes.
Oh
But we
wow.
don't want to forget brother David Barksdale
That's right,
as well,
David. Oh boy, that was
who laid the foundation for Larry
yeah. Without David, forget about King David.
King David.
Look, let me tell you something. Now, I think I've shared this with the public, and if I haven't, I think I should.
Okay.
I was in both of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I didn't get initiated,
Hmm.
but I was fascinated because back then I'm living in the projects.
Yes.
So, but before we moved in the projects, I was living on 63rd, and my mom was right off of I think it was 63rd and Normal,
Okay.
Parnell,
Parnell.
63rd and Parnell,
Hmm.
and I went to Kershaw
Okay. You
Elementary
had to be a
School.
disciple over there.
Yeah, it had to be a
You had to be.
disciple. I was at Kershaw,
You live one
but
block away from Larry lived on not Larry. David lived on 64th and Union.
right, I had both tams. I had a
A
red
red one and a
tam
blue
and a
one.
blue tam.
Okay.
When I went down State Street, I would wait till I get to 51st and State. Now these brothers were sharp.
Yeah.
They dressed, I mean, they skin, their diction, they were very intelligent and they were so respectful. I looked up to them.
Mhm.
So I was with the Black Panthers, but I had my tam. I stuffed it. I bought a red tam. Oh, I love that tam with the. So I would put it on when I got to 51st and State Street. Put it on right, and then you had to represent back then, but it was with dignity.
Mhm.
It wasn't no foolishness.
Right.
So when I got to 51st and State Street, man, I put that bad fella on because I couldn't let my mom and the
Right.
people down in my building see it. So I put it on. It was sparkling red,
Mhm.
just to walk down to the hole.
To the hole.
I wanted to go in the hole.
Coverstone.
Yeah, man, I was walking, man, with proud, because you couldn't say nothing to me with that tam on. I was walking and strolling. I ain't lying. I was so happy. And the brother was like, yeah, represent, little brother, because, little brother.
Yes,
now I'm an athlete.
Mhm.
But I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And, bro, that was so deep in my life. I had this tam on. When I went down in the hole, it was like the birds. They was around the playground. You know how the birds
Yeah,
was in that
yeah.
movie? It was red tams everywhere.
Yeah.
And I wasn't into shoot nobody. They wouldn't even that thought.
Mhm.
I wore that tan for girls. Yes, I did. I mean, I wanted to be a tough guy, and which I was, and still I am. But I wore that tan because the women, man, the girls, they was like, damn, he clean. You know, we were clean. And then I go and I stayed for about 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, just to show you I was on the move. I wasn't there permanent.
Right.
It was just to get that feeling. I wanted to see how it felt that, you with this other group of people and they were all representing, you hit your chest, stone to the bone, stayed there in the hole. They was some guys looking at me like, don't you run track for DuSable? I said, yeah, I do that too. So I went back home, got to 51st Street, put the tam up, stuffed it in my pants, went on home normal. And then when I went over 63rd Street to visit my friends over by Carl, I had my blue one, put that one on. Yeah. Now I said all that to say, bro, when you say the Almighty, then you just call him that.
The Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation. Yes, sir.
Why do you call them the Almighty?
That was the name of their organization. That's what they call themselves, Almighty.
Damn.
But both, interestingly, the disciples call themselves Almighty Disciples. Early on, David and them call themselves Almighty Disciples.
Wow.
So both groups recognize the strength.
What happened? Because this time gonna go by fast, yeah, so you got to tell the people.
Same thing happened to all of our other Black organizations, our Black nationalist organizations, that they were firstly targeted. Well, they were first targeted. Secondly, they were infiltrated. Yes, agent provocateurs that were installed in these organizations to. The same thing that happened with the Panthers. I mean, the story is the same. And ultimately, the lack of internal discipline, that basically caused them to, I would say, to lose focus internally. But during the time prior to being infiltrated, they were very, very powerful youth organizations, both of them. Probably two of the most powerful, if not the two most powerful street organizations in the United States of America.
Wow.
So as you mentioned, the book that I was able to co-author with Sister Natalie Moore, I'm working on the counterpart to that book now that focuses on the disciples and their history and their growth and development. So in order to really understand what ultimately happened with that organization, that still exists in many forms. It exists in the same way it existed back in the 60s and early 60s when it was to really understand the organization itself. Like anything, you have to go back to its origins and to its birth to see what brought it into existence. So right. I'm at that particular point in time in the research of the book, and it's really a fascinating history. Yeah. And I think that the community is going to be really. A lot of these things we already know, but hopefully what the book does is places the story and a narrative within a historical context that focuses on the political and social dynamics of the organization.
Can you give a sociological and a psychological perspective when you talk about how those organizations had been, you didn't use the word penetrated, but I am
infiltrated,
infiltrated and really deeply penetrated with those type of agent provocateurs that was bent on destroying. What did they fear? We talk about a Messiah, but what did they fear? A Black Messiah?
Oh yeah. I mean, Hoover said in terms of his warning to America that, Chicago street organizations were the number one enemy to the domestic existence of the United States of America. So if you recall back in the 60s during the civil rights, but particularly the Black Power movement, and see the thing that differentiated the Black Power movement from the civil rights movement was that the Black Power movement was not adverse to violence in order to defend itself.
That's right.
Right. That, we know the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, not encouraging violence.
Fight with those that fight with you, not to ever be the aggressor.
Absolutely. And so that was the germ seed for the Black Power movement at that particular time. And so you have brothers and sisters who endorsed that thinking. And some of the organizations that were in alignment with that thinking were the Disciples and the Blackstone Rangers. They endorsed that thinking, and because they had already, the difference between them and other mainstream organizations within the Black community is that they had already demonstrated the willingness to do violence. Unfortunately, that violence was perpetrated against themselves, Disciples versus the Stones, or the Stones against the double six, Cobra or whoever.
Right.
We were fighting each other. But the fact that they understood the use of violence, the fear was that the government's fear, the city's fear was that they would be politicized by organizations like the Nation of Islam or other nationalist organizations. And then what will happen is they would take their political orientation and their willingness to do violence and direct that towards the government. That's what they were concerned. The government was concerned about. So they took all means and methods to derail that movement and turn it into a new direction. But I will say, another, even if we step back in history prior to the brothers and sisters fighting each other, what we find in their history, like you actually have to go back to the late 40s. If you recall, from the early 20th century, when Black people began to migrate to cities like Chicago, we essentially, all of us lived in what we call today as the Black Belt or Bronzeville. That's where we were segregated. That's where we had to live, right? And it was the 1948 Supreme Court decision to strike down restrictive covenants because, those restrictive covenants were legal means to prevent Black people from purchasing homes in white neighborhoods and white communities. It would penalize whites who sold their properties to Blacks. And in 48, that was struck down, which then opened up communities like, so if we living in a Black, so you think about the Black Belt, today, you're thinking about the near South Side. You're thinking about the area where Lake Meadows and Prairie Shore is, from 22nd Street to 31st Street, up in there where Lake Meadows and Prairie. That was the original Black Belt. That's where Black people live and concentrated for 30 or 40 years. And when they struck, and what happens is at that point, the city is so many Black people migrating to that area from the South, it becomes a massive slum, and it also becomes prime property too, because the city itself, the business district, is growing. That. It's coming. So the city of Chicago starts its birth at the Chicago River, and it begins to grow south. It's coming south. And by the time our people get here in the late teens and the 20s, the downtown area is coming up on the Black community. And so they decide, Black people got to go.
Then.
Yeah, they got to go. And so in the 40s, they begin what they call urban renewal, what we would call today, we would call it back then Negro removal, but I'm saying, given that history, because that history is what gave birth to what we call today our street organizations. Because what happens is in 48, 49, Black people now are beginning to move into, now notice this is real interesting because we're living on what we call the low end, down in the 30s, right? Down in Oakland, right? But what happens is we're beginning to be displaced. And they're going to place us in communities like North Kenwood, Oakland, but the University of Chicago, which is you think about the 77 neighborhoods of Chicago, Kenwood is one of those neighborhoods. But if you ask people about North Kenwood, they will tell you that that's a definite community, like the North Kenwood, the Kenwood Oakland community organization. But people will tell you North Kenwood is a community.
Right.
It's a neighborhood,
Right.
but in
Right.
actuality, it's not. It's just Kenwood. Kenwood runs from 51st Street all the way to 3rd Street. But when the blacks got displaced out of the Black Belt and were being pushed out, the University of Chicago, who was involved with they were the brain trust of this gentrification or urban renewal, knew that blacks were going to be coming their way. They retreated from 43rd Street back on the other side of 47th Street, where the Kenwood, where the minister and where Obama and them lived. And what they did was they set up an economic barrier there. They did a whole mass. They actually, the University of Chicago actually were the first ones to implement what we call urban renewal within their neighborhood. Wow. So they created a barrier so that blacks could not move close to the university, and redirected them, gave them North Kenwood, which then turned into a ghetto, a slum.
Yeah.
Right. And if you notice, ain't no slum from 47th Street back to the Midway. Right. Because that's the University of Chicago. And then on the other side of that is Woodlawn. So they were taking black folks who had historically lived in the Black Belt of Bronzeville and displaced us to North Kenwood, then pushed us into Woodlawn, where white ethnics, the Germans and the Irish and whatnot, were living, pushed them out of their neighborhoods. See, this is the thing that white folks don't want to deal with, that all white people ain't equal. So when it comes to, who gonna get the first, it's a certain group, a certain class of white people, the Jewish and what we would call the Anglo-WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, who had the university in Hyde Park community. And at the expense of the ethnic whites, they took their land and gave it to black folks. Same thing in Inglewood. So I was saying all of that to give the background. What happens is when the first few black people start moving into these neighborhoods, buying a house, not really understanding the dynamics, but buy a house in Greater Grand Cross, buy a house in Inglewood, then the white ethnics would attack them, see them out on the street and beat them bad, beat the kids, burn the house down. And it was the brothers from Bronzeville or from the hood that would hear about this and get themselves together and go over there and offer some aid and assistance. It wasn't the educated black folks that did it. It was the street brothers. And the street brothers, based on organizing to go support brothers and sisters that were being attacked in their new neighborhoods, they started forming what we call today. As a matter of fact, I came across some information recently that it was a family of some little brothers that got jumped on 63rd, around 63rd and Halsted by a mob of whites. This was in 49. And about 6 or 7 little brothers they lived along State Street around 33rd, the Stroll, what they used to call the Stroll on State Street, when that was the all black community. It was 5 or 6 of them got together, got in a car and drove over there. This in 49. And they got caught. And the police caught them and interrogated them, took them to the station, and they said, "What y'all doing over here?" And they told them that these white people over here giving our people hell. So we did this, and we coming over, and that's where these names start coming up. When you use the disciples, we the devil's disciples. Like y'all giving us hell over here, we gonna come back and give you some hell, and we the devil's disciples.
Yeah, but look at the word disciples and Blackstone.
Yeah, well, Blackstone comes from the name the street Blackstone.
Right.
But in divine order, it has a whole nother meaning, right?
Exactly.
But so it's these small groups of guys that are striking out to defend the community. Ultimately, what happens is, because whites really were being pushed out of these neighborhoods, it only took about 10 years for that neighborhood like Inglewood to turn totally black. Now you got these little cliques that were put in place to help defend black people are now in this community, this new community that has been starved of economic growth and development and opportunities and education. They just took everything and left us to languish. And then what happens is we have to fight each other over little resources. And that's when the traditional gangs start to emerge. In addition to that, prior to the from the early 1900s all the way to the 1940s, we had an infrastructure for organized crime in the community. So you had the policy kings, you had the Mush Mouse and the Jones brothers, and these were black gangsters, but they were professional. So these were the brothers that they were businessmen. I always tell the young brothers that I'm working with now, what's the difference between being a gangster and a gangbanger? And at the end of the day, once we talk it through, what they realize is that a gangster uses legitimate businesses, political ties, to further a criminal enterprise. So in other words, if they're doing something illegal, like selling, at the time, prohibition, selling alcohol, then they would do it. It's illegal, but they would do it with the consent of the police and elected officials, which means basically they taking some of their profit and they paying off the police and they giving money to political campaigns. And so everybody got to understand, and everybody is eating, and they are professional. And it's in their interest to keep the peace and harmony in the neighborhood so that they could do their business. They don't want no problems. They want to look professional. They want to look good.
Did you ever write The Godfather?
which is a powerful book. But what happens is when prohibition ended, and them brothers were making all that, because that money was used in the black community to build banks, insurance companies, startup businesses. That money was coming from policy, from gambling, illegal gambling. But it was done in a way that it kept the community intact. So what happens is, at the end of prohibition, Italians lost a lot of money when alcohol became legal, and they looked around to see how they could replace it, and they looked in the black community first, because they saw that the Jones brothers on 47th Street was bringing money in hand over fist through policy. And so they came in, because these brothers, although they were gangsters, they were not the brutal, murderous gangsters like the Italians. They were businessmen. And so the Italians came in and began to kill them off. And so here was what was happening in the community. If you was a little brother in the neighborhood, and say you had an unfortunate family situation where your mother and father may have been, alcohol addicted to something, you was a street kid, and you was out on the streets wild in the teens, the 20s, and the 30s, when your future was clear that you're gonna be a little street hoodlum. The policy kings, the professional gangsters, would come and scoop you up, bring you in, and say, hey, look, this is how you do it, and start you off in the minor league, to groom you, to show you how to do this in a way to keep the community intact. But once in the late 40s, after they killed Teddy Rowe, who was the last policy king, I think he was killed in 48. There was no infrastructure in the black community anymore to groom the little brothers, to show them how to do the streets in a way that it left the community intact.
Wow.
So they rose up, and that's when we began to see the origins of the Vice Lords and the Stones and the Disciples. But when they come into existence, there are no men there to teach them the ropes. And so they make a mess. But even in the mess that they made, when they matured a little bit, and they realized the errors of their ways, their spirits told them, we can't keep doing this. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. Like I found in the archives some hidden records, a beautiful letter that David Barksdale wrote, powerful letter.
Really?
Where he wrote to the community. Now, he's 21 years old.
21.
And he wrote a letter to the community called The Disciple Story, telling their story about who they were and the problems that they were having with police brutality, how the community wasn't supporting them, how preferential treatment was being given to the Stones, which it was, right? A divide and conquer move. And he was pleading with the community, look, don't alienate us, help us. We can solve these problems in the community, right? So that's the story that I want to tell. There are countless of narratives and stories where these brothers are trying to get themselves together. And at the same time they're trying to get themselves together, they're having peace treaties and truces, and their money starts coming in for what they would call the Poor People's Campaign, not Poor People's Campaign, but the anti-poverty initiatives coming from DC. Poor People's Campaign was Dr. King's initiative. And that money is coming in. Now, all of a sudden, here come the Negro professional, the preachers, and the educated ones who see this money coming in on behalf of these little brothers, and now all of a sudden they care about them. And they get in front of the little brothers to get the money to help the little brothers, but don't really understand. Like the streets, that's a different culture. So the brothers with the bachelor's degrees and the master's degrees, and here they come now. And what they doing is
skinning it and grinning.
Yeah, and they don't understand how the streets work. So they'll scoop up the stones and they'll give the stones stuff. But the stones live on one side of Woodlawn and the disciples live on the other, 1 block away, just one street dividing them. But the disciples don't get nothing. I was reading a piece now, and then you had the white do-gooders coming in. They're going to come save black people.
Talk about the white
do-gooders. Well, the white do-gooders, Reverend Fry and them. Yeah, we got them today. They all around us today. It's more of them today.
With the same scheme.
Don't understand the culture. They're going to save black people. Don't understand nothing about black people. But they're going to save us from us. So you had Fry, you had Clement Stone, you had the I'm trying to think of it now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it was one of the big faith organizations, the one that's got the divinity school right here at the on University of Chicago. I can't think of the name of the group now. Yeah. But they gave the Stones $7,000. The Stones and the disciples were having a big. As a matter of fact, I was at that meeting as a kid. This meeting that they were having on Lake Park, 44th and Lake Park, and the day after the meeting, the group comes in. Goodness gracious, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, they gave the next day they gave the Stones $7,000, and $7,000 in 1968. That's a lot of money. Right. It gave them $7,000 cash to go buy a grocery store. A grocery store? Yeah, which is a good idea.
Yeah.
But they gave it to them, and the disciples didn't get nothing. So what you think the disciples think about that? And they're going to disrupt that. They're going to disrupt anything to do with that. And that was what was driving. But again,
who gave the money?
The faith organization that I can't think of their name right now.
The faith.
It was a church base. A church base. Yeah. Okay. I just can't think of their name right now. I'm sorry.
But I know you can't bring this up to current in terms of some of the dynamics. Yeah, I know you can, but I'm saying right now, can you? Because before you bring it up, can you make the I want you to connect the dots to where we are right now with the madness, because ain't no growth and development going on right now, and we talking about little misguided young brothers who they call cliques and etc. But before you get there, this sociological piece, that backdrop that you talking about, that's amazing, bro. Yeah. So the do-gooders, and you mentioned this happens in all of our organizations, the nationalists, Black Power, civil rights, and then the street organization. So where we are now and where we were then,
it's the same place.
And so, but so was it incarcerating that the leadership caused the void, or was it taking the men out of the homes?
Yeah, I mean, the community. It's a combination of those things. So of course we know that the welfare policy during that time contributed to encouraging men not to be in their families. We know the saturation of the communities with guns was an issue. Probably the biggest issue for the brothers in our communities at that time was the dumping in of heroin.
Yes.
we talk about, it's a story. Very interestingly, I was talking to some brothers about this. Then these are brothers who are actually they were involved with this, but didn't understand what was going on. So I was sharing with them some of my research where in 68, 66, 67, 68, the black street organizations, it was prohibited that you be involved with selling heroin. That was something that would get your head split. So within the Stones organization, the individual who really reinforced that concept was Chief Bull. And he was adamantly against heroin being sold in the black community. And he would teach this to his members. And a couple of young brothers, one was a little brother named Dennis Jackson. He was about 14 years old. Him and a couple other little brothers, they saw some men selling heroin in Woodlawn, and they shot him. They shot 3 of them, and they killed one and severely injured. And when they finished, they went to the church, the headquarters, and told Bull, we got down on them guys. So they told him what happened, and he said, well, look, y'all just go get y'all a sandwich or something, and y'all need to go away somewhere, and eventually the police found these little brothers and interrogated them, and they had mentioned in their interrogation, yeah, we did it. When we finished, we went and told Bull. So what happens is they take Bull and charge him with solicitation of murder. Now, solicitation is when you pay somebody to go do something. He knew about it after the fact, but he didn't tell them to do it.
Right.
So anyway, but the interesting part of this is at that time, Bull and the Stones were being helped by Reverend Fry, who was the pastor of Presbyterian, and he had Fry had hired a white guy named Chuck LaPaglia to be the church's outreach worker. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a white dude, Italian white dude, who was hired by the church to be the Stones' kind of caseworker, outreach worker. Mm. But if you look into Chuck LaPaglia's background, you will see that in the 50s, he was a part of a heroin investigation, a sit-in heroin investigation, where he was helping to traffic heroin from New York to the Midwest. He was one of the top lieutenants. So 10 years later, now all of a sudden, he is the outreach worker for the Stones, who had been working with them and understanding the dynamics of the organization. All of a sudden now, Bull is snatched off the streets. The one who was the leader of Don't Sell Heroin, all of a sudden he gets this bogus charge and a 15-year sentence that he goes away at the end of 68, August 68. Here come the heroin.
All the way into what, 70 something?
Yeah, he got on about 7.5 years. It was a 15-year sentence. I think he did 7.5 years.
Did he have the same strength when
he came out? No, not only did he not, but the whole community had been devastated. This is doing it when the Superfly era comes in. So now we get saturated with heroin.
Heroin and then
cocaine. But the heroin was what really did it. So the question is, where did that heroin come from? And where did Chuck LaPaglia come from? All of a sudden, he's in this big heroin thing, and you get to snatch him, and so that's the kind of stuff that happens.
That's heavy, though. That's heavy.
And then the brothers start fighting over, when the heroin come, they start fighting over the heroin money, because they don't know no better. Bull gone. Ain't nobody here to check him.
Man, and what made our people shoot? I mean, so many musicians and just regular people, but I know a lot of musically inclined people were really addicted to heroin.
Now, see, here's the thing about that. That segment of our community had been introduced to heroin earlier than the 60s. You're right. The jazz community was really, that was prominent in particularly the jazz and blues community. But it stayed among, because it was so expensive, it stayed among the entertainers within the entertainment community. But them policy kings, them gangsters in it, they did not allow that out on the streets with the regular brothers and sisters. You could use it if you were in a club, in the back of a club someplace, and then they had white folks that were their handlers that was getting it for them.
But so, Professor, in the 80s, here come AIDS, here come crack, here come gangster rap.
Same thing.
all at the same time.
Same thing. It ain't no different. Just a recycled model. So we know where the crack come. Don't Rick Ross ain't the dude going to get no crack and cooking no crack. The government bring it in and give it to them. And because we poor and we desperate, then what do? We don't know no better. And we jump right into it and it destroy our community.
So educating our people and you all that are tuned in, honestly, you know, definitely please share. This conversation, brother. I'm gonna go back and study this because you know you need this backdrop, you need this foundation, because how could you influence the shorties
if you don't
know the history?
Yeah, that's right. You got to understand the history to place everything in the appropriate context. So you know the natural instincts of oppressed people is to fight their oppression, to be liberated. You ain't nobody got to, you know, teach you that. Your spirit, your God spirit pushes you towards liberation.
That's right.
So these little brothers that were running these street organizations, didn't nobody need to sit down and tell them what to do. Their spirits told them this is what we need to do. And at the point that they start, you know, recognizing the error of their ways and begin. So here's another like interesting piece, specifically with the disciples. In 69, this is when David changes the name of the disciples to Black Disciple. And when he was asked, why are you changing the name? He says, I want disciples to become more aware of their Blackness, to be right. And so he begins and he started this before 60, but 69, he becomes very intentional about us being the disciples being Black, pro-Black, and doing Black things and fighting for the Black community. So February 69, they changed the name to Black Disciples. Then he organizes about 50 or 60 little brothers and take them downtown and to do a march. Two by two, 50 to 60s lined up, single file line, 2 by 2, and he marched through the loop in downtown, going through stores, go up in the Commonwealth Edison. And what is he doing? When they ask him, what you doing? He said, you know, these brothers ain't never been downtown before. I want them to see how, so they'll know how we can operate in our community. He starts an organization called Black Pride Incorporated, becomes a nonprofit organization. He had been fighting with other segments of the disciples. He was fighting within the disciples to make them come together. So Larry and them was supreme gangsters, and so he I don't want to tell too much if people don't want to read the book, but
no, I love it.
Where he actually deals with Larry like he's his son, and check Larry. And in 68, now Larry and them fierce enemies with disciples. I mean, they shooting and killing each other.
Hoover.
Yes. Yeah, Larry wasn't originally no disciple. But David came in and whooped him. He didn't shoot him, he whooped him with a stick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He spanked him. And the next year, Larry joined, brought his guys over.
That's pledged him.
Yeah, they became Black Gangster Disciples. Not only did he whooped you the year before. Could have easily killed him, but that wouldn't have been no problem for him. If he wanted to, he could have hurt him. But that was love that he, you know. And then because Larry was a soldier, he brought him in and changed the name of his organization to accommodate Larry, and made Larry a king. Because he saw the potential in Larry.
Saw the potential.
Made him a king and said, I'm going to take your name from your organization and make it a part of my organization. So we become Black. They was already Black Disciples at the beginning of the year. Then they become, by the end of the year, Black Gangster Disciple Nation.
Wow.
So they doing stuff like that. They taking kids to...
not Black Game Banger, but Black Gangster.
Black Gangster Disciples. Because Larry and them were gangsters. They were supreme gangsters. And they joined with David and the disciples and became Black Gangster Disciples.
Man, post-traumatic slavery, post-traumatic, the American way, they became true Americans.
Yes.
operating with the same blueprint of Americans. You know, you send Michael away to the army, but yet you gangsters, and you got the courts, you got the police, you got all of this stuff in the palm of your hand, controlling it.
And people will say, you know, oh, they was killing each other. Yeah, it was killing going on, but this was killing out of desperation. These were people who were, you know, look at the first of all, the neighborhoods that they were, how we were treated, how we were uprooted from our neighborhoods that we had lived in the block for 30 years, and you snatch us up and throw us in the neighborhood where white folks trying to burn down our house and beat us down when we walking through the streets. So we got to have some kind of defense, man. Then what happens is, as we trying to organize to defend ourselves, then you just totally abandon the neighborhood. You pull out all of the infrastructure and then say, oh, they killing each other. Then you dumping money in, playing divide and conquer, pitting one against another, and oh, they killing each other. Then you dump heroin into the community, oh, they killing each other.
So you put the
then you close the schools
cage
down. You know, you start doing the same thing we doing today, where we changed the borders. That's what they did on the Disciples and Stone. They had been going to Hyde Park and going to Parker and going to Inglewood. They changed the boundaries of DuSable. And so now if you went to DuSable, you got to go to Hyde Park. And if you went to Hyde Park, you got to go to Parker. And what you think kind of confused? That same thing going on today. It ain't changed. Ain't nothing changed. Ain't nothing changed. It's the same script. But even in all of that, them brothers tried to get organized, to do the best that they could do. They was having peace treaty after peace treaty after peace treaty. They shooting each other. They coming out of meetings, shooting at each other, and 2 weeks later go have a peace treaty with each other.
Wow.
They wanted peace. Look, David came out of a meeting, directly out of a meeting that was organized by Winston Moore down at the county jail, he was a brother who hated the streets, had a severe disdain for Jeff Ford and Bull and Dave, but he called them to a meeting, and they in the meeting 10, 15 minutes, and he said, this is a waste of time. Why don't y'all just go fight? And put him in David a Golden Glove box, and he throw him in a room with little, you know, at the time, Jeff, little skinny dude.
Right.
And you know what you think gonna happen? David banged him. And that gets out in the community. The David Barksdale beats up Jeff Fort, the leader. So what you think the Stones gonna do now? So David comes back to the neighborhood, and the police come up on him and say, hey, I heard you kick Jeff Fort's ass today down at the county.
Oh boy. Wow.
And so David said, yeah, you know, they got a hit out for me now. And David said, follow me and watch this. And David drive over into the Stones neighborhood, and they let his car, blah, blah, and they go in. Fortunately, he ain't even injured, but they go get those guys that shot him, attempted murder, and then it causes a war between they had just come from a truce meeting to agree to a ceasefire.
Right.
And then this happens, and the week after that, they get together again. Now they tried to kill this man, and this man goes back and has another meeting with them to come to some peace. But they want to tell us how much killing they did and how ruthless they were.
And so the kids, the government kids, they kids still got these brothers underneath the jail. They kids. These kids weren't even born.
Right.
A few of them, and they out of it. So University of Chicago.
Yes, they still in the middle of it. Still right in the middle of it. Crime lab over there at University of Chicago. Got all the money to study about it, but I think our time is up.
Wow. Hey, brother, how y'all gonna do that with the man? You got to do part 2. This is way too powerful, brother. We can't end this show like this. I mean, you can. There's no way. Next week. When week after next.
I got class, so I'm starting the summer semester next Monday.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy.
So we got to go.
Anyway, we got to roll. Thank you, the greatest producer on the planet up in here, Mr. Earl Winfrey. I ain't feeling him right now because he's telling us we got to go. He's doing this. Y'all can't see him, but he's like, end this show. Thank our founder, Minister Michael Muhammad, all of the members of the New Black Leadership Coalition, and all of you all for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Professor Arthur and Father.
Yes, sir.
And husband.
Thank you, Brother Gregory.
Peace and love. You all share this. Thank you. Wow, that went